Good evening.
Good evening.
You know, it was a typical day in Thailand. At that time of year, the days were long and hot as I began testing air-to-air sidewinders in our 70-degree missile shop. It was 1971, and 200 miles away, the war in Vietnam was raging. Suddenly, the chief said to me, "Sergeant, take 3 guys down to the bomb dump. They need help." Damn, they must be bombing the shit out of Vietnam to have to help bomb crews. We got there and 3 dozen guys, shirts off and sweating like hell, were handling 500-pounders. There were crews of 4, and I looked for my buddy Juan Rael. Instead, I saw Carlos, who said, "Hey man, what's up?" I said, "Hey, I just brought some intelligent guys to help some dimwits do their job, you know?" He smiled that sneaky grin of his and said, "Go and join Juan's team and I'll take your guys to form a new crew." Juan came over and said, "Hey Rick, come on over and give us a hand." Compared to the complexity of the work we dealt with in our missiles, it was easy. Of course, we worked on hot asphalt in the sun with no shade or wind, and that heat was intense. Bombs were delivered by cranes and dozens of them placed onto racks. We inserted fuses into the warheads and the final arming was done on the flight line before loading. Now I gotta say, those bomb crews were good. They knew their business and worked hard at a mind-numbing pace, one lot after another. We kept at it for 2 hours and then went over and hugged the wall of the nearest building with some shade and took a break. With legs on the ground and backs to the wall, we sat dazed in our sweat and stench and let our minds wander. I looked back at the revetment with crews hustling and saw evenly spaced rows of metallic monsters with fins. Dark gray-green fish without souls, yet within them, a dormant heart of unlit fire waiting only for a spark that would ignite death around them. I was pulled 2 different ways. I felt I had accomplished something, and yet, as time passed, my thoughts shifted as a rising sense of guilt questioned what I was really doing. Haunting images crept into my mind of bodies being mutilated by the bombs we delivered. We had worked like hell to arm those things, and yet I wondered how many innocent women and children would perish from stray bombs in our attempt to win this war. Later, I found that a lot of guys felt the same. Just then, another team came our way. We went back and worked bombs by the hundreds for 3 hours, took a break, and then another 3 hours. Totally wiped out when we finished. We crowded into step vans to head back to the barracks, glad that shit was over. We'd meet up later at Juan's place. I got cleaned up, changed, headed uptown. There were maybe 20 people at Juan's bungalow. Carlos, a Puerto Rican from the Bronx, had a unique kind of craziness you admire. Bernard Crumpton, who we called Crump, from the South Side ghetto in Chicago, was a quiet guy with a brilliant mind. Juan, from Albuquerque, had this infectious laugh that was utterly contagious and always got us in a good mood. I can still hear the echoes of his laugh today. Now his girlfriend, Ulai, her back hunched by the scoliosis of her spine since birth, was surprisingly elegant in her actions. Dark, smiling eyes revealed the secrets of her unassuming beauty. There was another guy there, never knew his name, but you looked up to him for the way he carried himself. After Vietnam, he came over to Thailand and he was a real stand-up guy. That's just what I call him, stand-up. That night, some guys smoked weed. Others snorted Red Rock heroin. We all had our own way to blow off steam, and yet we looked out for each other. I was swigging down a bottle of Singha beer that some called formaldehyde, including me. But I didn't care. I liked it. It went down easy. And I had some Mekong whiskey to sip to trim the edge off my disgust at those images I had earlier at the Palm Dome. I was watching stand-up in Carlos across the room, and then I noticed some smartass who claimed to be a friend of Juan's take something out of his pocket and hold it in his hand. Curious, I saw him flip the cover of his Ronson, light it up, and when that thing in his hand flared up, Juan yelled, "What the hell? Hey, what the hell are you?" The guy threw it on the ground. It was a fucking cherry bomb, and it was devastating. Stand-up hit the deck flat out with hands over his head as if to protect himself from shrapnel. Juan shouted, "What the fuck you doing? He's just back from the Nam, you goddamn fool." Crump and I grabbed him and hustled him out the door and saw him bounce his way down the steps to the bottom of the stairs. Nobody gave a shit if he broke a leg or landed on his head. I never saw that son of a bitch again. I turned back and saw Carlos on his knees. He had also spent a year in Nam. Now, he and stand-up were okay, but shaken. My imagination told me that in that ragged moment of time, their lives had been suspended like the dew on a spider's web. And now those drops had been spread out on the floor like tears falling in the aftermath of war. Scared half to death, Yulai melted into Juan's arms. Her tears opening a flood of action. Crump and I helped Carlos and stand up to rise from the floor. Carlos took a deep breath, glanced around and said, "Hey, it's over. We're okay." Crump and I went around the room to make sure everyone was okay. It took a while, but we all settled down and found ourselves grateful to be amongst friends. I used to think of days like that, and it really put me into a funk, because everything miss those guys. But the years have passed, and I look around and remember that today I'm surrounded by men and women, civilians and veterans, all of whom have unexpected abilities to relieve my haunted thoughts and to heal the wounds of war and each other in whatever way they can. And I'm glad.